Good afternoon. Today I'd like to discuss our strategy document for our upcoming campaign in East Grand Forks, Minnesota. Now, as you can see by this slightly crude map, East Grand Forks is the community on the right-hand side, bordered to the west by the Red River of the North, separating it from the state of North Dakota and the city of Grand Forks. To the north, east, and south, the city is really marked only by its continued expansion, and this is simply as far as it's gone. Now, the last time we dealt with East Grand Forks, we talked about community asset mapping, and community assets, of course, were pools of potential capital or assets that could be motivated and utilized by the community. So, for example, we have a few here, like physical capital being the makeup of the community, infrastructure present in the community, to include the two major streets, Demers Avenue and Gateway Drive, two county highways, one state highway, two bridges connecting East Grand Forks to Grand Forks and Minnesota to North Dakota. We also have financial or business capital. These are the institutions, both financial and in business, that bolster economic activity. There are three financial analysis organizations, mostly for the farming community, but anyone is allowed to use them, given the price, of course. And then our two largest hiring pools, which would be the University of North Dakota just over the river, which draws a lot of its population, its staffing population, not just from Grand Forks, but also East Grand Forks. And then Northland Community College, a Minnesota State community college that does draw a majority of its staffing population from East Grand Forks. We also have environmental capital, and these are the green spaces and natural resources present in the community. The largest one being the Greenway, a park lining the Red River of the North, the banks of it, shared in part by East Grand Forks and Grand Forks. We have social capital, and these are organizations, meeting halls, and groups that make up the social core of our community. In East Grand Forks, that means the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Freemasons, and the Knight of Columbus, out of the numerous Catholic churches present in the community. We have political capital. These are the political structures, government structures present in the community, to include the legislative and administrative bodies spread throughout. So for the city of East Grand Forks, we have the mayor and city councilors, as they represent two at-large wards and then 5 normal wards for the remaining councilors. And of course, the bureaucratic structures that exist under them for licensing and tax collection. The city of East Grand Forks has a monopoly on power and water production. And so that structure is also included in our political capital. Our cultural capital, these are pieces of art and places of cultural significance to the community, which, as I noted in my asset map, the city of East Grand Forks is a little lacking in. Our best example is the East Grand Forks Arts and Crafts Council in downtown East Grand, who maintain an art walk through museum and a organizing body to encourage local art production. So what is the issue? What is our upcoming campaign in East Grand Forks about? And as I noted in my paper, although East Grand Forks has a relative balance in its capital institutions, there are problems that persist, as every community will have problems. We talked about the upcoming wave of opium expenditures, or rather opium-related expenditures and loss that has been experienced by a lot of small-town America. We talked about budget efficiency, but given its ability to really mitigate and lessen other issues, the issue we'll be discussing and we're going to be working for is eroding social capital and social ties within the community of East Grand Forks. On the page here is the Midwest Academy strategy chart, and this will be our basic organizing tool for explaining and understanding how we're going to conduct our campaign in the coming 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, however long we deem this campaign necessary. And it'll really help structure our thinking, so we'll just launch right into that. So we have our goals, and goals can be broken down into 2 categories: our long-term and our short-term goals. Our long-term goals are big, they're expansive. We're discussing building an entirely new organization that would bolster development of social capital and social ties. This is a huge project. This would be the ultimate victory in our eyes. But we also have a number of short-term goals that are far more achievable, a lot closer to us, but that will ultimately serve to bolster the chances of achieving our long-term goal. So some of our short-term goals are forming an ecumenical body for organizing religious volunteers, creating a general calendar of events to map overlap, especially amongst veterans organizations, political structures who hold, say, parades or various events, and also creating an organization capable of reaching these members. So forming a basic body that has members in a lot of these pre-existing social communities, so that should the need arise, we can reach out and speak to someone in that community. What are our organizational considerations? What things do we need to keep in mind as we conduct our campaign? There are some positive considerations and some things that could potentially hold us back. Our positive considerations, our campaign requires very little funding, which is always a positive. Revenue streams can be incredibly difficult to nail down, and that won't be something we really have to be concerned with, which is a good thing. There are some channels of existing intercommunity connection and dialogue that will help bolster continued dialogue. And it's helpful that these connections already exist. People know each other a lot better than, say, if we were starting this campaign in a larger city. However, as I said, there are some things that could potentially hold us back. Should financial burdens arise, we don't have a hard revenue stream or particularly deep pockets to deal with these issues, and that is something that is going to be potentially very dangerous to the success of our campaign. Given our organization is attempting to meet with members across the political and religious, economic, and ethnic age spectrums, all of these variables, internal dissent can be prolific. Now, of course, we'd hope that once you had joined the organization, your congruence of values and goals would smooth over this dissent, but that's not always possible or realistic to hope for. And then so we do have to be aware that organizations are reliant upon their members, usually not only to stay around as an active organization, but to secure revenue. And as a new organization attempting to not necessarily take their members, but enfold their members in a different organization, we could be viewed as a threat. And that's something that we definitely need to keep our eye out for. Our next part of our strategy is the constituents, allies, and opponents. These are the people within our community, the groups within our community who fulfill a particular role. Constituents are the people that our campaign is seeking to help. And given that we are organizing for social change in whatever form, change is all-encompassing. It's spread pretty evenly. And so our constituents for East Grand Forks would be generally anyone who is affected by our change, anyone involved in the organization or otherwise. Allies, these are the specific people who are going to help us, who are going to be our biggest allies. That's where the term comes from, in launching our campaign. So there are some pretty easily defined groups, including the elderly and older citizens who lived through what Robert Putnam described as an erosion of social capital. And of course, there are some organizations who might view our action as an attempt to expand their own involvement, or rather an opportunity to expand their own involvement and their member base, and could be a potentially very powerful ally. That being said, our opponents can be these exact same organizational leaders who interpret our growing membership, our presence in the community, as a threat to their own membership and to their own revenue streams. As well as our opponents can be seen in the political establishment. Our goal is not to foment revolution in any way, shape, or form, but when people get together in social groups, we deal with the governance of these groups through political science. And should the community get together in our organization and determine that some form of political change is required, the political establishment, the political structure can view that as a threat to their own levels of power. Whether or not it is entirely up to the community. but that notion, that change from ally to opponent, especially in the political structure, can be very quick and very dangerous. So who are our targets? These are the specific members within the community who hold some form of political, social, organizational power that we're going to target with our campaigns, which we'll discuss in just a little bit. So in our social organizations, specific targets include Pastor John Ritchie of the Mendenhall Presbyterian Church, whose congregation is very active in the community. There's Father Xavier Longo, the resident priest of the Sacred Heart Catholic Church and of the school encompassed there within, who has a lot of control, not only within the diocese, but also influence with parents who are sending their children not only to his Catholic school, but one of the other two in the community. Mrs. Wanda Donasek, leader of one of the social organizations in East Grand Fork, the Eagles, and Mr. Matthew McGrew, the current president of the Freemasons in East Grand Forks, who represent a lot of the old guard structure in East Grand Forks. Our political targets are pretty obvious, pretty easy to see, including Mayor Steve Gander and councilpersons Clarence Vedder, Mike Porzutwinski, Tim Riopol, Henry Tweeten, Mark Olsted, Chad Grassel, and Mark Demers. Not only are the following, excuse me, not only are they legislators, but they actively sit on administrative committees as well. So their power is sort of twofold in this organization, in this political structure, as opposed to, say, on the national scale, where legislators don't also fill bureaucratic positions. And the veterans organizations, which hold particular sway amongst the older generations, our two strongest targets here are going to be Mr. Lyle Rose of the American Legion and Mr. Wendell Sorleen of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the current presidents of those respective organizations. Finally, I'd like to discuss our tactics and what specifically are we looking to do with our campaign. And we're applying a mix of an informational and collaborative campaigns. So for our social organizations, especially the religious ones, our information about our goals and structures are really not needed. They understand communal change and community action, and they encourage it every day in their congregations. What they do need is a group to help a collaborative action. Pastor John Ritchie in my interview discussed the presence of an ecumenical body in a lot of his previous communities, in which high-ranking leaders of different churches and congregations got together to organize not only volunteer events, but actions like food drives and things like that. And organizing a collaborative body like that is something our organization is interested in. The political structure is very much susceptible to an information campaign. Right now, we represent an otherness, a potential change in the political landscape that can affect their jobs, their livelihoods, the amount of power they hold within the community. And again, we have to make it clear that our express goal is not fomenting revolution in any way, shape, or form, but encouraging citizens to be active and participatory within their government, within their community, in whatever direction that they feel is for their own benefit. The veterans organizations propose a similar challenge in that they are in need of both informational and collaborative action. Our informational work, we have to ensure them that we're not out to steal membership or steal revenue streams, which these organizations rely on for a lot of their shared events, especially for big fundraising events like Veterans Day and the 4th of July parades and things like that. But at the same time, just like the religious organizations and the social organizations, our collaborative action for forming an intercommunity body and bringing those veterans organizations together is something that is required by our organization. It's a service, and it is an action that we can take to better our own ends. With that, that'll be the entirety of our presentation. Thank you so much.